I've got to be honest, the first time I tried to print a large format sign on a cheap inkjet that claimed poster-grade quality, I ended up with a faded, smudgy mess that took half an hour to clean off the floor. That kind of buyer regrets spending a few bucks on a budget printer only to waste time and material keeps a lot of freelancers and small shop owners from ever taking the plunge into big format printing again. So when I heard about the Canon imagePROGRAF TC21M, I asked myself the same question every cautious buyer asks: is this really a smarter buy, or just another pricey gimmick? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The first thing that caught my eye was the way Canon frames the TC21M as a multifunction workstation, not just a printer. In real-world terms, that means you can print, scan, and even copy up to 24-inch documents without swapping machines. For a graphic designer who needs to proof a billboard mock-up, or an architect who wants to hand out large-format plans on the fly, having a single device that can handle both a roll of banner material and a stack of cutsheet A4 is a genuine workflow shortcut. The built-in 2.7-inch touchscreen is tiltable, which makes it easy to glance at menus while you're standing on a ladder or crouched over a drafting table, something you don't think about until you actually need to navigate through settings with greasy hands. Let's talk about the automatic sheet feeder. It can hold up to 100 sheets of letter-size paper, which sounds impressive on paper, but the real benefit shows up when you're printing a series of small-format PDFs for a trade show handout. Instead of manually feeding each sheet, you load the stack, press start, and the printer does the legwork. That's a solid timesaver for anyone who prints in batches. However, the feeder is limited to standard thickness. If you try to jam thicker cardstock or glossy photo paper, you'll hear the motor grind and the feeder will stall. So, if your business hinges on thick cardstock prints, you'll need to feed those manually, an extra step that can feel like a step backward. Connectivity is another area where the TC21M tries to earn its price tag. It supports USB flash drives, Wi-Fi, and LAN, plus cloud printing and scanning. In practice, this means you can drop a USB stick at the office front desk, walk over to the printer, and have the file spool without ever touching a computer. I tested the cloud print function with Google Drive on a Windows laptop, and the job queued within seconds. For a small studio that relies on multiple workstations, that level of flexibility can keep the print queue moving without a single device becoming a bottleneck. The trade-off is that the Wi-Fi setup isn't as plug-and-play as consumer-grade routers. You'll need to dive into the printer's network menu and possibly assign a static IP if your office network is complex. That's a minor inconvenience for IT-savvy shops, but a real pain point for solo creators who aren't comfortable tweaking network settings. Now, who should actually buy the imagePROGRAF TC21M? The sweet spot is anyone who regularly produces large-format graphics, think signage, architectural prints, event backdrops, or fine art reproductions up to 24 inches wide. If you're a freelance designer who occasionally needs a big poster, you'll probably find the price a stretch unless you plan to use the machine weekly. The multifunction capabilities also make it attractive to small studios that need a scanner for capturing large sketches or plans without buying a separate flatbed. On the flip side, if your primary printing needs stay within A4 or you rarely exceed 1,117 inches, a lower-cost consumer printer will cover you with less maintenance hassle. Speaking of maintenance, the TC21M carries the typical inkjet overhead of regular cartridge replacements, but Canon's high-capacity ink tanks last longer than standard cartridges, especially when you're printing in draft mode for large posters. I ran a 30-page test of a 22-inch marketing banner using Canon's economy mode, and the ink lasted through the whole batch without any faint lines or banding. That translates into a lower cost per square foot than many competitors that force you into expensive, small-capacity cartridges. The downside is that the ink tanks are not user-replaceable on the fly. You have to open the rear cover, which can be awkward in a cramped studio. If you're used to swapping cartridges in seconds, you'll need to build a small ink change ritual into your workflow. Another practical strength is the Enlarge Copy feature, which lets you pull a small original from a letter-size source and upscale it directly on the printer. In my test, I placed an 8.511 photograph of a product prototype on the feeder, set the enlarge factor to 200%, and the printer produced a 1722 print with surprisingly sharp details. For photographers or product designers who need quick size-up proofs without moving files between a computer and printer, this can be a real time saver. However, the feature is limited to linear scaling. It doesn't offer advanced interpolation that a dedicated RIP software would provide. If you need high-quality enlargements,